It is 9 a.m. Gentlemen, if you'd like to join us at the table. Thank you. All right, welcome to the elected officials meeting, December 21st, 2022. The time is 9 a.m. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks and Duncan. Commissioner Filios had a prior obligation. And I do want to say, welcome, Jim. This is your last official elected officials meeting. So, yes, so we'll get right down to business here. Item number 1 is Office of Emergency Management Countywide Tabletop Exercise. And I think Tiffany will go ahead and speak to this.
Yeah, so I've been working with Grant on the cybersecurity response and mitigation plan, and we've been collaborating, and through that we began the updates of the COOP and COG plans, which is the continuity of operations plan and the continuity of government plan update. And while we were talking, I don't know if some of you remember, but back in 2018, we did a tabletop exercise with the departments to kind of test their COOP COG, but it focused pretty heavily on facilities relocation. And in the conversations with Grant, there's a huge issue with cybersecurity and making sure that the essential functions that your departments carry out, you have things in place to be able to do those without internet connectivity or network connectivity whatsoever. So what we are wanting to introduce is the ultimate goal is to have a tabletop discussion exercise in November, the fall of 2023. And between now and then, we'll be working with your respective departments to gather the information regarding the essential functions that you carry out, how you would carry those out without network connectivity, and kind of understanding the risks associated with cyber. It does happen all the time. It's happened in Idaho. A couple of weeks ago, there was an incident that happened in southern Idaho. So preparing for that, and as we do the COOP COG, that's going to be one of the newer focuses. We'll also be working with HR as well as getting some of those policies to support some of the things in the COG. I mean, I noticed you have the all hazards plan, the all hazards policy in there as well. So we'll be working with that. But what we really wanted to do is to introduce you guys to this topic and then get buy-in for you as we move forward and just make sure that we're getting the information needed when we put this plan together, because it is heavily dependent on the information you provide us with. And we'll be working on facilitating all of that, but just asking for your support in that process.
All right, questions for Tiffany?
What time frame are you looking at for the incident? Is it days or weeks?
We haven't started like what the scenario is going to look like for the tabletop specifically. I mean, if we're looking at some of the cyber incidents that have happened in the past and trying to pull a scenario from those real world incidents, there's been times where it's been weeks without connectivity. So I would think we're not going to go for something that doesn't allow us to test. We want to test some of those pinch points and be able to flesh that out. So I'd say at least 5 days without connectivity, maybe a week or more. But we'll flesh that out as we get a committee set up with the designing of the actual tabletop and bounce that stuff up. But we just, again, need those essential functions you carry out and how to do so without IT connectivity. If you look at an incident that happened in Alaska, like they had a huge impact to way stations, and just like how do you collect that data and that information for billing when you don't have your systems? And I know we all say go to pen and paper, but sometimes that's easier said than done. So just kind of thinking through all of the impacting scenarios. So.
The time frame that you pick is going to be critical, because if you're only on about 2 weeks, now you're looking at payroll.
Okay.
Other things that just extremely challenging.
Okay.
So
Keep
something
that.
less than 2 weeks.
Less.
Keep in mind it'll shut down the courts too. They don't have any recourse.
Okay. But what I'm going to ask is I'll be reaching out to your departments to just get a point of contact for each one and working with them and just support and knowing that the exercise and the plan is only as successful as the information provided. So that's my spiel for you.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else have questions?
Oh, and Grant mentioned to me, I spoke with him yesterday, that he is here to support you. Like if you guys have something that you come up with, but that's critical to IT, he can talk through some of that stuff with you. But again, just kind of think of worst case scenario, and then we'll find the middle ground from there.
Okay. Bill, any questions for Tiffany?
No, I have no questions.
All right, thank you. All right, we can move on to number 2, Memorandum of Understanding for IT Access and our Human Resources Department. Sylla, do you want to take this.
Sure. We have been working with IT and Nancy Pluff, and they've had designed some HR reports for us. And so we now have staff on board that have the ability to write our own reports. So what we're trying to do is we're getting training in the SQL reports, because right now most our reports are in Crystal, and they're not as efficient as a SQL report would be for us. And what we're looking to do is having access to New World data, and we do pretty much almost 99% of everything. What we're not seeing is garnishments and W-4s, but we collect the W-4s for new employee orientation. So we see everyone's social security number and status. And there isn't an issue with confidentiality there for us to be able to view or export data. We wouldn't be using that data. Our reports would be more about around the realm of turnover, or employee pay reports. So if we created a turnover report, an elected official wanted it monthly, because that's important that you see that data first, we could send you those reports. We can set it up automatically that you get your turnover reports on a monthly basis to your office. Of course, we would maintain the confidentiality of stuff. So this would allow us to create our own reports, modify them, and maintain our reports. So due to the constraints, not them not being able to help us, but IT may take a week or two to fix a report for us that we may need readily available on hand right now. So we do employee pay reports, benefit reports, EEO reports, and anything HR related. So that's what we're looking at. We had a meeting with IT, the commissioner's clerk's office, HR, to discuss this, and the decision was to bring it forward to all the elected officials. So you have the ability to give us some input and we move forward. But it would help us be more efficient and effective and manage our own reports.
Thank you. Sylvia, can you explain what is an emergency report that we've got to get out so quickly?
Well, if we're working on a compensation report, there may be some data that we don't have access to, and IT has been really pretty good with us. But if we are just working on something with the department, say they're looking at restructuring or whatever, and we need to make sure that there isn't a parity or a compression issue, and we find errors with the report, we would be able to go into SQL and see what's going on and modify it.
Will these reports come to the auditor for review before releasing them? We've had issues in the past, as you know, with Sheriff's Department, with the turnover report.
Yeah.
And that leads me to a real question. What is the purpose of the turnover report online? Why don't we just keep that in-house?
Right, and I think we need to have, because that came up a few months ago about the turnover report, and maybe we don't want to publish it.
Well, I wouldn't think so. It looks like we're not a very good place to work.
I'm open to it. It's been online since 2018, I
Yes.
think is when it started.
And many of us have objected to it since 2018.
I think if the elected say, and the board say take the turnover report off of our webpage, we do. But I think it's useful information for each of the elected officials or department heads to say, where am I seeing this turnover? And we can be working with each elected official to get those reports. But that isn't, I mean, that's just one tiny piece, but I know it's a sensitive issue.
And we can generate it ourselves.
Yeah.
So.
I think also a distinction should be made in terms of what you're measuring in the report. I think the label of a turnover report suggests, like Jim Brannon's saying, it may not be a good place to work, but if it's a separation report, you look at an employee who retires, you expect employees to retire. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but the concept of turnover suggests a bad thing. So maybe it's a separation report, something simple, but.
And I just do want to clarify, so when we had this meeting, we discussed the non-disclosure agreement, anyone having access to New World, and then the MOU just saying if there's going to be a report released about another elected official's department, that they are made aware of it before it's released either to a public record or to the press, so no one's caught off guard if they get a call and have to respond to that. So I do ask, just in respect of other elected officials, that would be done.
All right, so Sil, is that an MOU that you and legal can put together and make sure that some of these things are outlined?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we can, and we can bring it back.
And I would also add too, if it has to do with auditor information or financial information, that we be able to review that, particularly payroll information too, before it's released, whether it's HR or the board, please.
And we will not release overtime report or any financials. We would be just looking at our HR general information.
Yeah,
But
except
if
they
it
are being
involves-
released.
Well,
I'm
not by
just
us.
saying.
Yeah, but
They
not by
are
HR.
being released.
Yeah,
There was a report that didn't reflect very well on our assessor. There was a report released that didn't reflect very well on the clerk. Report released didn't reflect very well on the sheriff. So these reports are not being monitored once they're generated, and that's the big issue.
and we'll build that into the MOU. You know, if it's something specific, if I were to get a public records request about an elected official, I would be working with you, and also my elected saying, hey, the media wants this. And when Barry was here, the rule we set with the media is put your request in writing so then we can address their specific questions. They've never asked anything like specific to one EO, but we work through it and I've always had it vetted. But I see, you know, we see the importance that the EO knows what's being requested, and maybe you want to respond to it, and it'd be more appropriate for you to respond, not HR. So if we can pass it back to you guys, we're gonna pass it, because it's your office.
I think just the main thing with being able to create the reports, having access to those tables is what we're dealing with right now. And then the MOU can address the releasing and stuff like that.
And right now, the current employees that I know there's non-disclosure that do have access, they're going to sign the MOU too, correct?
I was just going to have the Board of Commissioners sign the MOU and the elected officials.
Okay, so not the people that actually
But-
have access to the information?
Well, they're not releasing it. And we need to go back to the custody, the people who have permission to release records for each department. And things should go through them. So it's all kept in one place.
Okay.
Any other questions for Sylvia? Bill, any questions?
No, I have no questions.
Okay. So look for that in the future.
Yes, thank you.
And if there's any changes to the MOU, then obviously let us know. Okay. All right, item 3, all hazards policy. Once again, we just don't know what we don't know, and every time an incident happens, we try to handle a little bit better in the future. So, Sylvia, I don't know if you want to speak to this. Did everybody have a chance to review what I sent Monday? Okay, are there any questions, comments, something that needs to be added or taken away from the policy?
I can give you
Give me-
the court's comments.
Get your,
First of all, Stan wanted to be here. He had a training he could not get out of, and he thought this was a pretty important meeting from the aspect of this issue. He went and talked to the administrative judge, Judge Meyer, yesterday afternoon about this, and she was firm in her standing that this would not control the courts, and consequently wouldn't control the public defender's office or our office. And so I think that's essentially what he wanted to make clear. Nor would it control what any judge wanted to do, because she basically doesn't have any control over the other judges, even though she's the administrative judge. Each judge will do what that judge wants to do. And so we don't have any control over them.
Right, and the same thing goes for the clerk's office. If there was something that came down, they are subject to the courts, so they wouldn't be able to do that either. And honestly, from a philosophical standpoint, there's very few times where we should be closing even non-emergency things. If Home Depot's not closing, if Costco's not closing, the hospital's definitely not closing. Why can't our people get here? So that's just kind of where I look at it. I mean, obviously the time we had the windstorm and literally trees were blocking the roads and we couldn't get here. I mean, that's something different. But I think school closures, really are the lowest bar, right? So if you look at some of the retail establishments being the highest bar, I think if they're going to stay open, then county services should stay open. With the fact that we all have employees who have needs and, to work with individual elected officials and HR to handle those needs if they're unable to get here because of weather constraints or whatever. But in general, I'm fine with working with the skeleton crew. I'm fine with working, some people can work from home. That's already been established. Those kinds of things are great. But in general, when we closed a few weeks ago because of the big storm, which I would argue yesterday was way worse, there was at least half a dozen people that I came in contact with who wanted driver's license and motor vehicle license. And I'm like, I'm sorry, they got sent home. So if our constituents are going to come out, then I think we should be open. And, the court being a whole separate issue is fine. And I didn't see anything in here that made me believe that this was going to apply to the courts. So it was mostly for non-emergency county facilities at that point, so.
I haven't had a chance to review as thoroughly as I'd like to. How soon would you want a response back on this? What is your goal in terms of timing to get this?
It would come through an HR meeting to just be a new policy that is proposed. So the first time we could really do this would be January 12th.
Commissioner,
Yes.
if I may, on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, I'd like to, maybe we could table this for further discussion at the next one because the Sheriff and the prosecutor both not being here.
Okay.
I think, albeit having reviewed it, it's a very good policy. I just don't know if a blanket, if you will, policy that affects what the different entities that may have, if you will, asterisks at the bottom, that I think some discussion could be added. So I think that would be beneficial if we tabled it, give some forethought in regards to the specific groups, and then bring it back up before the elected officials to further discuss.
We can do that because then the next HR is January 26th. And so we can hit the elected officials meeting before that meeting. It's just winter's going to be half over by then. So these are the kind of policies we kind of want in place sooner than later, but, noted. So. Treasurer Matheson, any comments? All right. Bill, any comments?
I agree with the undersheriff. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. All right. Anything further on the all hazards policy? Okay. All right. I will call for public comment.
Hi, my name is William Lee. I'm from Florida Lane. I just wanted to say that Merry Christmas to everyone for the outgoing elected officials and employed staff and everything. This is kind of cheesy and everything, but I've said this before, but I love living here. It's a great county, and what you guys do, has contributed to that, has made this a great county. So I just want to thank you and say Merry Christmas, even to some elected officials who have done some things that are inimical to liberty and freedom. Also want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. That's it.
Thank you. All right. Jonathan, anybody on that? All right. Well, 9:20, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.